The content of this podcast is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended as, nor should it be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. Hello, this is Karen Nickel, family nurse practitioner, and you are listening to Itchy and Bitchy, a podcast that provides answers to your many unanswered health questions. Before I get started, I want to remind you about my course called The Perimenopause Answer. If you are going through this phase of life called perimenopause, or if you're not sure if you're in perimenopause, I would love to have the opportunity to talk to you about the course to see if it is the right fit for you. I have really enjoyed getting to know many of you, and I'm so grateful to you for listening to and sharing the podcast. There is a link on our website, itchyandbitchy.com, and our Facebook page, IMB Podcast, where you can schedule a Zoom call meeting with me. I'm going to say it again. This is a Zoom call with me. It is not a webinar. So when you make an appointment, I will be sitting at my desk waiting for you to join the one-on-one Zoom call. Also, I want to thank Cindy, who left a review of the podcast on the Apple Podcast app saying, quote, Karen makes it simple to understand. My sister says she puts the cookies on the bottom shelf so normal folks can grasp and understand. Thank you, Karen. Another review left by Honey, You're Pretty says, quote, I first found Karen by getting on the Leanne Morgan train. That's a wonderful train. That's what I said. Not Honey, but anyway, getting on the Leanne Morgan train and was instantly impressed and thrilled. Karen is super clear, helpful for all of us who have questions and concerns about hormones regardless of age. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to educate ourselves so we can live our most fulfilling life, end quote. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Honey, You're Pretty, for your kind comments and for leaving a review for us. We have the absolutely best listeners. I recently read an article about whether or not home tests for menopause are worth taking. And one of the titles was that, are they worth taking? Which already sort of ruffled my feathers. But anyway, reading that one article led me to search more articles about this, and truth be told, all of them made me mad. I'll try to explain my anger a little later, and I hope I don't go off on a total rant in the process, but I may. I can't guarantee it. I'm going to start by going over some of the at-home female hormone testing that is available. These at-home menopause kits are now available online and in drugstores, ranging in price from anywhere from about $10 to nearly $200. The company Clear Blue, which is known for its home pregnancy test, made news when its menopause kit rolled out in August of 2024. It is called the Menopause Stage Indicator. This new at-home test led to a lot of press about at-home testing of female hormones. It seems everyone wanted to share their 2 cents about this testing option. The Clear Blue Menopause Stage Indicator includes 5 test sticks. The testing mechanism is like their pregnancy test, but it tests for a different hormone. This is a stick that you pee on to get a measurement of a pituitary hormone called follicle stimulating hormone, which we abbreviate FSH. This hormone comes from the pituitary gland, and it sends a message to the ovaries to secrete more or less estradiol, which is one of our estrogens in our body, in the female body. When the estradiol levels fall, FSH rises because your brain is telling your ovaries that more estradiol is needed. Essentially, it's your brain screaming at your ovaries, we got no estrogen up here. Get cracking and secrete some estradiol. As women get closer to menopause, the FSH levels start to rise. Our hormones vary from day to day, so the Clear Blue Kit involves collecting 5 different samples every other day over 10 days to see if your overall level is low, high, or variable. As part of the evaluation, they have an app in which you enter your symptoms and period history to help determine where you are in the perimenopause to menopause process. After a woman uses the urine indicator 5 times over 10 days, she gets a report that gives her the 5 FSH results, also an estimated stage of menopause, and a summary of any symptom data that she tracks. And this is using the app that comes with the kit. And the kit costs about $20. Brands such as Everlywell, Reveal, Thorne, Ova, and others also offer at-home tests. The Ova test kit is also a kit with urine sticks that you pee on, and you collect samples for 15 consecutive days, so you're not just capturing one hormonal moment in time. The testing methods vary, but generally speaking, these kits measure reproductive hormone levels to give insight into where a person might be on their menopause journey. Some kits require a urine sample, some a finger stick blood sample, or possibly a sample of saliva. Some of these test kits not only measure the FSH, like I just discussed, but they also may include luteinizing hormone, another pituitary hormone, or estradiol, progesterone, or progesterone metabolite, and or testosterone. There is a lot of pushback from the so-called experts on direct-to-consumer home testing to check hormonal status, but let me remind you that we have a long history of home testing that doctors are perfectly comfortable with, including testing for glucose, which is blood sugar, so testing for your glucose levels, pregnancy, cholesterol levels, blood in the stool, COVID-19, HIV, and hepatitis. These are all at-home tests that are commonly used, and providers are A-OK with their use. Some endocrinologists also have patients do at-home thyroid and or cortisol testing. After this break, I want to talk about the response from some endocrinologists and gynecologists that about made my head spin off my body. So I will be back with that information, and hopefully I will keep my head on my body. Okay, I just want to start this part of the episode by saying that one of the reasons my practice was so busy was that women couldn't get help or answers from their PCP or GYN or endocrinologist when they reported their hormonal symptoms to them, and they heard from friends and family members that I could help. So they came to me because they had heard they would get some answers and some help. I started focusing on helping perimenopausal and menopausal women during the last 20 years of my practice, and I had hoped that over those 20 years, our world of medicine would learn how to care for women as they move through perimenopause and menopause. But no, it feels like nothing has changed, and it absolutely breaks my heart. So, here are some of the things that the endocrinology and gynecology experts have said about home testing for perimenopause and menopause, and my thoughts on their comments. In general, experts say they're skeptical that these kits offer any real benefit. You're going to be listening to a lot of quotes from these people, but I think it's important to hear what they're saying in their own words. Tara Allman, MD, a board-certified gynecologist, said about home hormone tests that, quote, they are just something that's monetizing fear and confusion around menopause. I don't see how it helps women, end quote. I have heard from hundreds of women that it's their gynecologist, not an at-home test that has caused confusion and fear about menopause because they don't get answers or guidance from their GYN provider. They often say they walk out of their appointment knowing less than they did before they walked in. Karen Adams, MD, who is a clinical professor of obstetrics and gynecology at the Stanford University School of Medicine, says, and this is referring to the Clear Blue Menopause Kit, that, quote, "It's understandable that a product like this would come to market because there is such a lack of access for people who are going through menopause to get in to see a provider who's educated and can help answer their questions. But the clinical utility is just not there," end quote. So she's saying, yeah, it's hard to get in to see somebody and get help, but that kind of testing has no purpose. Okay, Dr. Adams, there is a lack of access because there aren't enough providers who are educated on and willing to answer questions about perimenopause and or menopause. That is the fault of our medical schools who don't cover or barely cover menopause or perimenopause in their curriculum, and there are so few providers who care enough to educate themselves on the subject so they can help women going through this stage of life. So rather than spending time trashing at-home testing that has come into being because women can't get answers, how about using that time to advocate for change within the system so that women can get the care they need? Experts like Dr. Adams are unconvinced that the tests can reliably gauge menopausal stage. Dr. Adams says that doctors don't typically use urine samples to measure hormone levels. She also states that, quote, "Using urine or saliva kit results to start a menopause conversation with your healthcare provider could, in a worst-case scenario, even aggravate the situation," end quote, because, quote, "women may get the reaction of eye rolling or dismissing it because it's not the method most doctors would use," end quote. Oh my gosh, I am going to have to take a blood pressure pill. This is exactly what I'm talking about. First of all, over the years, I have observed that most doctors don't use any method to help these women. This expert is admitting that providers dismiss women even when their patient is trying to open up the conversation by bringing in some at-home test results to their provider that, along with their symptoms, could indicate that there is some hormonal imbalance going on. Why should doctors ever be dismissive of their patients? Ever. Ever. When I have conversations with women who are interested in my course for perimenopause, I hear the following phrase over and over and over again. Quote, "I was dismissed by my provider when I brought up my symptoms." I was dismissed. I have to give kudos to Richard Auchus, MD, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Richard Auchus, a professor of pharmacology and internal medicine at the University of Michigan, who was quoted in one of the many articles I read. He warned providers saying, quote, "Even if you dismiss the test, don't dismiss the patient. They really are having a problem. It may not be medical, but you have to point them in the right direction," end quote. In the article, Dr. Auchus also stated, quote, "I'm not opposed to at-home hormone testing using clinical laboratory improvement amendments," that's CLIA, C-L-I-A, approved legitimate testing venues. So many labs that we use in the medical world are supposed to be CLIA approved. Also, a shout out to Michael Zilberman, MD, Associate Professor of Clinical Medicine at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, who said, quote, "I never encourage patients to use these tests, but I personally believe that this is part of the future of access to endocrinologists and treating hormonal conditions. We as physicians have to become more familiar with these so we can properly counsel our patients," end quote. Monica Christmas, MD, an associate professor of obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Chicago Medicine, says that, quote, hormone testing can help rule out menopause if a person stops having periods prematurely, but otherwise, doctors don't rely on these tests to make a perimenopause diagnosis. Instead, they look at age, menstrual cycle history, and a description of what a patient is feeling, end quote. I agree that you need to get all that information to help determine what is going on hormonally in women, but the kicker is the provider has to take enough interest and time to gather that information and do something about it, and many do not do this. Quote, it's really a clinical diagnosis in partnership with your healthcare professional, said Dr. Tara Ullman. Your symptoms need to be sussed out and sorted out with solutions, end quote. Susan E. Leb-Zeitlin, the director of the Women's Midlife Center at Weill Cornell Medicine in New York City, says, quote, I don't see much value in these tests for the average women. It's the symptoms that matter, not what the test shows. The most important thing a provider will do is discuss symptoms, including bleeding and other hallmarks of menopause, end quote. The statements from these two providers are absolutely true. But again, this requires the existence of providers who are capable of and willing to do this. They are few and far between. On the flip side, some experts say the test may give some women the reassurance that what they are experiencing is real. It can also help women distinguish between menopause and other conditions with similar symptoms. But ideally, it is best if these are discussions that are had with a medical provider, but doctors say they don't think women need an at-home test to start a conversation about menopause. Amy DiVerania, a founder and chief executive of OVA, the company that has the 15-day test I mentioned earlier, says that, quote, if women live to a certain age, 100% of them will go through menopause, and yet we still have very little understanding about what that transition looks like. The technology that we've developed really enlightens a woman with data so she can finally have a two-way conversation with her doctor, really understand what her body's telling her, and advocate for her own health, which is the ultimate goal, end quote. Fiona Clancy, the research and development director for Clear Blue, says, quote, our test uses serial FSH testing, cycle variability, data, and age to identify a woman's likely menopause stage. These variables were selected because they are part of a standardized set of measures related to assessing menopause, end quote. So it's just not just willy-nilly testing. There actually is a method to this process. Clancy also said, quote, we found that women really liked this report because it either gave them a little bit of validation of what they were feeling and it helped prepare them for a conversation with their doctor. They didn't go into the appointment feeling unprepared, end quote. Mary Jane Minkin, who is a clinical professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at Yale University Medical School, said at-home menopause tests can be validating for some women. Minkin, who was an advisor to Clear Blue on the development of its tests, said that, quote, they're made for people who are skipping periods. It's not going to tell you when your periods are going to stop, but it is telling you that a lot of what you're experiencing is hormonal, end quote. Further, she says, quote, is this a crucial test? No, but the feelings of perimenopause can be very, very frustrating for women, extremely frustrating. I think that if they have numbers from these tests with them, they will feel less likely to be dismissed by doctors. No test can guarantee that you're perimenopausal, but if you've got some symptoms going on, we can probably get you some help with them, end quote. How do you find a provider who specializes in menopause and will listen to you? Well, Many experts recommend using the Menopause Society, also known as the North American Menopause Society, to help you find a specialist through its website, www.menopause.org. That being said, Lisa Larkin, the president of the Menopause Society, states her view of at-home hormone testing in one of the articles I read, saying, quote, I see it as companies now recognizing the size of the market opportunity and the money that can be made right now. So there's some profiteering going on out there, end quote. Not a big believer in at-home testing, it would seem. I am not saying every woman should do at-home testing, but if you are having symptoms and you are not getting guidance from your provider, it can be a way to get some additional information about your hormonal status and can be used to open up a conversation about your symptoms with your provider. If your provider won't help you, please ask that provider for a referral to someone who will. If you want to review a symptom list and read a list of questions to ask your provider if you're having symptoms, go to our website, itchyandbitchy.com, and check out two of the blogs we have posted there. One is titled List of Possible Symptoms of Perimenopause or Menopause, and the other is Have an Appointment to Discuss HRT? Here's What to Ask. Thank you for listening and for sharing the podcast with others. If you listen using the Apple Podcast app, please leave a review and rate the podcast. Your reviews and ratings matter. I encourage you to visit our Facebook page, IMB Podcast, where you can leave comments or questions for me. Our website is itchyandbitchy.com, where there are blogs with some of our subjects available for you to read, including the two that I mentioned earlier. On the Facebook page and website, we have the information about how to schedule an appointment with me, not a webinar, so we can chat about how my perimenopause course can help you if you are going through this phase in life. As always, thanks to Forrest Wenzel, our producer and composer of our theme music, and the person who does all the behind-the-scenes work that makes this podcast possible. Thank you, Forrest. Check out his album called An Awful Lot. Go to wherever you stream your favorite music to listen. And if you don't know where to stream music, you can find the album on Apple Music or Spotify. Remember, your health is in your hands.